The rain had begun as a whisper against the windows, a soft patter that lulled the city into a false sense of calm. But by nightfall, it had grown into a relentless downpour, hammering the roof of the old house where Mrs. Amenda sat alone. Her home was a relic of another time, wooden beams, creaking floors, and walls that had absorbed decades of laughter, sorrow, and silence. Tonight, however, the silence was heavier than usual. The storm outside seemed to press against the house as though testing its strength, and Amenda felt the weight of her solitude more keenly than ever. She had lived alone since her husband passed away 15 years ago. Her children had moved abroad, chasing careers and lives that left little room for the frail woman who had once held their world together. They called sometimes, sent money often, but visits were rare. The rain intensified, and with it came the first problem. The electricity flickered, then died. The house plunged into darkness, save for the faint glow of a candle Amenda kept ready for nights like these. Shadows stretched across the walls, and the storm's roar filled every corner of the house. Amenda lit another candle and placed it on the table. The flame trembled, casting long shadows that seemed alive. She wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders and listened to the rain. The storm reminded her of nights long ago, when her husband, Henry, would sit beside her, telling stories to distract her from the thunder. He had a way of making even the fiercest storm feel like a lullaby. Now the thunder was only a reminder of his absence. She shuffled to the kitchen, her slippers dragging against the floor. The roof leaked in one corner, dripping steadily into a metal pot she had placed there weeks ago. The sound of water striking metal was sharp, rhythmic, and oddly unsettling. As she checked the pot, she thought of her children. Would they even know if something happened to her tonight? Would anyone come as she called for help? The thought gnawed at her, and she tried to push it away. The storm grew louder, and suddenly a crash echoed from outside. Amenda froze. It sounded like something heavy had fallen in the yard. Heart pounding, she shuffled to the window and peered out. The rain blurred her vision, but she could just make out the fallen tree branch that had landed dangerously close to the house. Relief washed over her. It wasn't an intruder, just nature's fury. Still, the branch had knocked over the small wooden fence Henry had built decades ago. She sighed. Another repair she couldn't manage alone. Returning to the living room, she noticed something worse. Water was seeping in under the door. The storm had forced rainwater into the house, and the carpet was already damp. She fetched old towels, laying them down to absorb the water, but she knew it was a losing battle. Her hands trembled as she worked, not just from age, but from fear. The storm was no longer just outside, it was invading her home. Hours passed, and the storm showed no sign of easing. Amenda sat in her chair, exhausted, when suddenly there was a knock at the door. Her heart leapt. Who would come at such an hour in such weather? The knock came again, louder this time. She hesitated. Opening the door to a stranger in the middle of the night was dangerous, but ignoring it felt equally risky. "Who is it?" she called, her voice trembling. No answer, only the sound of rain. She clutched her shawl tighter and moved closer to the door. The knock came a third time, softer now, almost pleading. Amenda's mind raced. Could it be a neighbor seeking shelter, or something more sinister? Before she could decide, the candle flickered violently and went out. Darkness swallowed the room. Amenda gasped, fumbling for matches. Her hands shook so badly she dropped them twice before finally striking one.
The flame illuminated the room just enough for her to see the door handle moving slightly, as though someone outside was testing it. Fear surged through her veins. She backed away, clutching the candle like a weapon. The knocking stopped. Silence returned, broken only by the storm. Desperate, Amanda reached for the old landline phone. She dialed her neighbor's number, but the line was dead. The storm had cut off the connection. Her mobile phone was no better. Its battery had drained earlier in the evening, and she hadn't bothered to charge it. She was truly alone.
The storm seemed to grow angrier, rattling the windows and shaking the walls. The house groaned under the pressure, and Amanda felt as though it were alive, speaking to her in creaks and sighs. She whispered a prayer under her breath, asking for strength. Then, from the attic above, came a sound, a dragging noise, slow and deliberate. Her blood ran cold. Amanda knew she couldn't ignore it. Gathering what little courage she had, she lit another candle and began the slow climb up the stairs. Each step creaked, echoing in the silence. The attic door loomed ahead, its handle glistening faintly in the candlelight. She reached out, her hand trembling, and turned it. The door creaked open, revealing darkness. She raised the candle, its light spilling into the attic. There was nothing, only old trunks, dusty furniture, and cobwebs. But then the dragging sound came again from the far corner. Amanda moved closer, her heart pounding. She lifted the candle higher and finally saw the source, a loose shutter banging against the wall, dragged by the wind that had forced its way in through a broken window. Relief flooded her, and she laughed softly at her own fear. Still, the broken window meant more rain would seep in, damaging the attic. Another problem she couldn't fix alone. She returned downstairs, weary but calmer. The storm continued, and she knew the night would be long. She sat in her chair, clutching her shawl, and whispered to herself, "I've faced storms before. I'll face this one too." The rain answered with another roar, as though challenging her resolve. But the night was not done with her. Hours dragged on, and the storm seemed endless. The water creeping under the door had spread, soaking the carpet and threatening the wooden floorboards. The candles burned low, their wax pooling onto the table. Amanda's body ached from the cold, her joints stiff, her breath shallow. She thought of Henry again, of how he would have handled this night. He would have laughed at the storm, called it a test of endurance, and held her hand until morning. She missed that hand more than anything, the warmth, the reassurance, the simple presence that made her feel safe. Alone, she felt fragile, like the house itself, battered by forces beyond her control. The knocking returned. This time it was softer, almost hesitant, as though whoever or whatever was outside had grown weary too. Amanda's heart raced, but she forced herself to stand. She approached the door slowly, candle in hand, and pressed her ear against the wood. She thought she heard breathing, faint and uneven. Summoning courage, she called out again, "Who is there?" Silence. Only the storm. She considered opening the door, but fear held her back. Instead, she slid the bolt firmly into place and retreated to her chair. If the storm wanted to test her, it would not find her surrendering easily. The hours stretched on, and exhaustion weighed heavily on her. She dozed off briefly, only to be jolted awake by thunder so loud it shook the house. The candles had burned down to stubs, and darkness pressed in from all sides. She felt the storm inside her now, a mirror of her loneliness, her fears, her regrets. Yet somewhere within that darkness she found a spark of defiance. She was old, yes, and frail, but she had endured much in her life: wars, poverty, loss. This storm was just another trial. She whispered to herself again, louder this time, "I will face this night. I will see the morning." And so she sat, through the long hours, listening to the rain, the thunder, the creaks of the house, the whispers of memory. Problems came one after another: the leaking roof, the flooded carpet, the broken window, the dead phone, the mysterious knocking, but she met them all with fragile courage. Alone, she was vulnerable, but she was also resilient. The storm raged, but it could not break her spirit. When dawn finally came, pale light filtering through the rain-streaked windows, Amanda felt a surge of relief. The storm had not won. She had endured. And though her house bore the scars of the night and her body ached with exhaustion, she smiled faintly. She had faced the rain's whisper, the storm's roar, the night's shadows, and she was still here.